These air traffic controllers witnessed it all.
I turned to the supervisor and I said, I think something is seriously wrong with this plane.
The first clue, a lost signal.
I said, American 11, is that you?
A chilling message, and
They pointed out the window and said, look at the World Trade Center.
then an unprecedented feat. To save lives, they cleared the skies.
And that's when the reality sank in. We're at war.
It's really nuts. The Skies Over America, reported by Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. Tonight, 9/11, 5 years later. The attack that day was a kind of event that quickly becomes a part of history. In movies, books, and in classrooms. The stories have been told again and again about everyone from the firefighters who sacrificed their lives to the airline passengers who fought back against the terrorist hijackers. But there is one group of people you may know little about. They saw the nightmare coming. The air traffic controllers in charge of the skies over America that morning. What they witnessed, even now, is hard to fathom. What they did was extraordinary.
It's a beautiful day. It was a great day to be flying.
Contact Boston Center on 125.
Controllers are doing a great job moving the airplanes.
Runway 4 left, clear for takeoff.
Nothing was different.
September 11th seemed a perfect day to fly in the Northeast. Daybreak was crisp and bright. There was unlimited visibility, no ceiling. Conditions were just right.
We were very busy. Things were moving nicely.
015, you may see traffic inbound for runway 4 right.
As usual, the skies over America that day were crowded with airplanes, often 4,000 to 6,000 airborne at any given time. For air traffic controllers, keeping them moving safely and on time is an intricate choreographed ballet, each plane moving through the air at different speeds, altitudes, and headings.
It is a thing of beauty. It is like clockwork.
Making it all happen is a complex mix of manpower and technology, procedure and judgment. The pressure is constant, the stress unrelenting.
British Midland 701, descend maintain flight level 350.
Despite the computers and training, the backup systems and safety equipment, in the end, it is the air traffic controllers who must, at a moment's notice, make sense of it all. But on this day, nothing would make sense.
You're ingrained to know that you're going to be faced with adversity or possibly even death. You always wonder, the law of averages, that sooner or later something's going to happen, and you just hope that it's not on your shift.
But for these 20 air traffic controllers and hundreds of others across the U.S., it did happen on their shift. 5 years ago, the morning of September 11th, they watched in disbelief as 4 passenger planes were hijacked, back to back, in little more than an hour. They were as stunned as the rest of us, working in uncharted territory, but at the same time forced to make critical decisions. Hundreds of thousands of lives were at risk. Tonight, they all share their story, what they saw, what they felt, as they were witness to the most devastating tragedy in aviation history. How much of that day has lingered with you?
The whole day.
Still think about it.
Yeah. There's not a day goes by where you don't have to think about it.
It all began at Boston's Logan Airport. It's morning rush hour. Planes are already stacked on the runway waiting to get final clearance for takeoff. 8 a.m. American Flight 11, bound for Los Angeles, pushes back from the gate and is cleared for takeoff. The Boeing 767 with 81 passengers, 11 crew, and 24,000 gallons of jet fuel lifts off, headed west. As the plane climbs out of Boston Logan, it's handed off from one air traffic control center to the next. By 8:10 a.m., American Flight 11 is in the hands of Boston's regional en route center, which is located 50 miles outside the city. More than 75 controllers are on duty at the time. Among them, Tom Roberts, Lino Martins, Don Jeffroy, John Hartling, Pete Zalewski, and Mike Blake. Within minutes, the 767 is climbing through 20,000 feet and onto Pete Zalewski's radar.
I initially climbed him to flight level 290, 29,000 feet.
8:14 a.m., 14 minutes since takeoff. American 11 is headed up to its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, but not before Zalewski radios the pilot a routine order to turn, to to keep enough space between American 11 and another plane.
I turned him the 20 degrees right, he took the turn. I then told American 11, climb and maintain flight level 350, 35,000 feet. There was no response.
A moment of concern, perhaps, but that was not uncommon.
At that point, I was just thinking that it was, maybe the pilots weren't paying attention or there's something wrong with the frequency.
Zalewski followed procedures, continuing to try to raise American 11 on the frequency.
And at first, it was pretty much, American 11, are you paying attention, are you listening? And there was still no response. I used the emergency frequency to try and get a hold of him through that. There was no response.
By now, Zalewski is running a mental checklist, trying to account for the loss of communication, a technical problem, or maybe a mistake on the pilot's part.
I went back to the previous sector to see if the pilot had accidentally flipped the switch back over on the radio. At that point, we had nothing. We weren't hearing from him.
American 11 was Nordo, no radio contact. Zalewski stepped up his efforts.
I would go on to call that aircraft 12 times. And as it went on, I even began to get more concerned.
You're watching American 11 at that point as well?
Yes, he was in my airspace at that time.
Colleague Lino Martins, working nearby, is now also tracking the American Airlines plane.
We saw him start the right chart, figuring Pete was going to climb him. That's when Pete called and said, no, he's staying at 290 because he didn't respond. He's Nordo.
I said, we're not talking to him, and he was the last assigned at 29, but he may have heard 35. I'm not sure what he might do here, so just watch him.
At that point, again, I didn't think anything was wrong.
But the second controller did have incoming flights directly in the path of American 11.
That plan ahead on this new heading he was on. He was opposite direction from the Boston arrivals, and I had to get them underneath him.
But then, at 8:20 a.m., American 11 abruptly changes course, turning to the northwest.
I then saw the transponder shut off.
And I'm thinking, well, maybe there's really something wrong. First, there's no radio. Now we lost this transponder.
Every commercial airplane is equipped with a transponder that transmits a constant signal. The signal gives controllers on the ground a steady flow of information displayed on radar screens in a data block, such as this one. Think of it as the airplane's vital signs: the carrier, flight number, speed, and altitude. If the transponder is not working, the plane is simply a blip on radar. Controllers can see only the location and the speed of the plane.
And so I very quietly turned to the supervisor and I said, would you please come over here? I said, I think something is seriously wrong with this plane.
Did you suspect hijacking at that point?
Absolutely not. No way.
American 11 has been Nordo for 6 minutes, and now other controllers are becoming concerned. Tom Roberts tries yet another method to contact the plane.
I would happen to be working another American flight on my frequency. One of our procedures or protocols is to go aircraft to aircraft on a company frequency to see if the pilots from one flight could talk to the pilots of another flight.
But that too fails. There still is no reply. The silence increasingly ominous as the jet, now drastically off course, flying in a northwesterly direction toward Albany, New York. Controllers are scrambling to help create a safe zone around the runaway plane, moving every other flight in the area out of the way, from the ground all the way up to 35,000 feet.
Pretty much moved all the airplanes
Right.
from Albany, New York to
Because I
Syracuse,
didn't
New York
know.
out of the way because that's the track that he was going on.
I didn't know when he was going to turn back, if he was going to turn back on course.
We had no altitude information. So it's
lost
not
the
just
altitude.
clearing the altitudes of
Right.
conflicting traffic.
It was that whole altitude stratum from the ground up to 35,000.
It's now 8:24 a.m., 10 minutes since losing contact. That's when controllers see the plane make another unauthorized turn, this time to the left, going south.
And that's when I heard the first transmission from the aircraft. And I wasn't quite sure what it was because it was just a foreign voice. It was something very different. To me, it sounded almost Middle Eastern. And I asked, I said, American 11, is that you? American 11, you trying to call me? And then came the next transmission. And in that transmission, I immediately knew something was very wrong. And I knew it was a hijack.
And what did you hear?
I remember the part of them saying they were going back to the airport. And by that, I deduced that they were going to go back to Boston. That's what I was thinking. And I didn't believe it was one of the American pilots on board. I immediately stood up and yelled at the supervisor, John, get over here immediately right now. And just remember everybody in that building and in the aisle just looking at me like, what is wrong with you?
Zalewski cannot make out exactly what the hijackers are saying, but the tone of their voices alone chilled him.
I felt from those voices the terror. For some reason, I knew something would seem worse than just a normal hijack. It just seemed very different to me.
Zalewski immediately asked for an assistant to help listen to the transmissions coming from the plane and puts the frequency on a speaker so others can hear. And he notifies the supervisor there is a hijacking, the first one on a U.S. carrier in more than a decade.